The Todd Shapiro Show.
Time to hit the button!
On Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
Lance Lambert, Boveda Herbal. There's always so much happening in the legalization space. And the beauty of it is I just get to give you a headline, Lance, and you break it down in a way I never could because you're not just well-read. You're constantly attending these conventions all over not even all over North America, all over the world. But we'll start in North America. The Republicans and Democrats are agreeing on there's a landmark hearing that cannabis laws basically they're a mess, Lance, and it's a mess in how I set it up. Break it down for me. What's going on? What's the latest here?
No, for sure. And what you're speaking of is a little get-together that happened on the Hill last week. So we actually had both the Dems, as we say, and the Republicans at the table. And it definitely was a landmark hearing, to your point. I mean, this is one thing where a lot of conversation has been at the Hill. You know, several episodes back, we talked about the States Act. We talked about the Safe Banking Act. Those are all great things, but this is really a first for both sides of the aisle, so to speak, to come together and just have open conversation about it. And one thing that was identified, I think one of the best quotes was actually from a Republican rep, which I have a lot of respect for, out of California, Tom McClintock, saying that marijuana decriminalization may be one of the very few issues upon which bipartisan agreement can still be reached in this session. Wow. And I think that just really hits home on the value of bipartisanship in moving this forward, because everyone has recognized that the Nixon days, the Reefer Madness days, the DARE program days, they didn't work. They weren't successful. I know even friends like you know, that are neighbors in other countries recognize that these programs were biased. They were, in many instances, racially driven or motivated, and just didn't make sense. They just weren't successful. So, yeah, that was definitely a landmark meeting up at Cap Hill that occurred last week, and sounds like things are moving even more so in the right direction than ever.
So, Lance, I have a couple thoughts about that. And the first thing is, you know, obviously in Canada, federally, we have a lot of power. The federal government can dictate the laws, and then the provinces can interpret them how they want. But when we had legalization here, it was a federal rollout. And in the states, you know, obviously each individual state has been able to pick their own spots. And it just makes me wonder, is that part of the problem in the states?
I think to a certain extent it is. It's quite frustrating because, to your point, I mean, to deal with a handful of provinces versus looking at 50 states plus D.C., it is a bit of patchwork that becomes a bit much. And so, I mean, if we do break it down now, we've discussed it before, but there are 11 states plus D.C. that have an adult use, or what most call a recreational program. So, in other words, those are spot on with what's legal in Canada. There's another 33 states that have some sort of medical program. And then the last few states, there's three where it is technically still illegal. That would be Idaho, Wyoming, and South Dakota. And then the other few, they've decriminalized. So there's such a majority of the country that said, yes, this is okay. And when you have the mass populace, which to your point, we have a bit more say, if you will, in legalization and laws, when 2/3 of the populace are saying, yeah, just legalize it already, it creates quite an interesting situation. But I do think that politics get too much in the way oftentimes for us in the States versus Canada, or any Commonwealth country for that matter.
Bilal Bakani in conversation with Boveda Herbal's Lance Lambert. We're looking at legalization in the States and a landmark hearing for the Republicans and Democrats. And we've got a caller, Lance. I think his name is Todd. I'm just going to see what he wants to say. Todd, where are you calling from?
Oh, Lance, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Lance.
That's the only Canadian Todd I know.
Is it going okay? How's Bilal doing? Is it going okay?
You know, he's doing phenomenally well. I'd be slightly concerned because he could definitely pinch it for you on a regular, man. There might be a little bit of insecurity. He's doing
I gotta tell you, that makes me happy to hear. I'll be honest. I there's going to be days that are like today, which has arisen. I don't know if Bilal updated you, but I bought a property and we sold a property and bought a property all today.
Yes.
And there was confusion. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. And so we basically moved homes today, and it all took place. But there was, like, on all ends, like, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And we literally, I'm with my wife, my little boy's in the back of the car, and we just picked up keys to our new place. And if we had not got it after 5:30, our lawyers were leaving. So it just worked
Oh my
out
gosh.
for us. We were going to be homeless.
Congratulations.
We were going to be homeless.
Yeah. We don't want that, especially not for your beautiful family. So tell the wife congratulations and definitely props. And I know how stressful that time can be. Trust me, I had to shift our move-in date for one of our quarterly meetings at work. So I know too well the challenge of balancing personal and professional when you're kind of a workaholic, right? Like you and I are. So happy for you, buddy. Definitely happy for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, no, it's been a very trying week between the move and everything. Yeah, it's amazing how it really is amazing how a move from packing to organizing to making sure your stuff arrives safely, especially when you're dealing with as George Carlin says, too much stuff, but yet you're concerned for it. It's amazing, really, how they say it's one of the most stressful things that a human can go through in their lives. And listen, it was pretty nuts.
Yep. It definitely, I think it's, moving, marriage, and a new career are the three most stressful things that can occur to us. So you definitely, you hit one at the top of the list there, my friend. But it sounds like you're making it through.
Yeah, and listen, we got the in-love corpse stuff was slowly on the go. I am married, and, my wife's pregnant. A lot of stuff going on. But I love it, dude. I wanted to ask you a quick question, and I just can't believe what I'm seeing all over Facebook, Lance Lambert, BovedaInc.com. And is it true that of the 500,000 plus people that are ready to storm Area 51 in a few weeks, that they all have used Boveda Inc. at some point to keep their stuff fresh?
Is this not crazy? I had to do a Snopes check on this when I saw that people are talking about storming Area 51. I don't know if they have enough reservists and local law enforcement to stop something from that happening with such a large group, but not the best time of year. I'm just going to, on a big tangent, speaking of logistics and due process, I'm a little surprised that of all time of the year, someone would want to storm Area 51 in July, because I'm just going to point out it's been 108 degrees for the past several days in Las Vegas. So, I mean, we're talking about pretty hot. And for translation in metric, what is that? 48 degrees, I believe. I mean, it's a little hot to be storming something in the desert for certain.
That is a really good point you make. I had never thought about that. That coupled with assault rifles, like on the U.S. military side, who have said, listen, this is a U.S. military practice zone, and we are not changing up our routine for you people coming in. Do you think these people are serious?
I don't know. It's crazy because there are a lot of individuals that are quite passionate about that topic, especially in the States. I know it's come up in Canada, but it seems the lower half of North America, specifically the U.S. and Mexico, are a bit more infatuated with UFOs. And not to discredit, I mean, there's definitely things that even I've seen out in space that are unidentified, or I've seen out in the sky that's been unidentifiable. But the fact that it's, them wanting to storm Area 51, which has been a test zone for all kind of skunk work projects and alike, I don't think it's the most advantageous thing to do. I don't think it'll be 500,000 people. I'd probably put it closer to a little bit less than that. But I'd be anxious to see what the outcome is. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Well, Lance, listen, I wanted to tag in here. We'll let Bilal do the serious interview now. It has been I really apologize for the unprofessionalism here live on SiriusXM. Boveda Inc., of course, and a massive friend and partner, so I'm sure you would understand real-life situations. Enjoy the rest of it with Bilal, and we'll do a proper catch-up next week. Okay, my friend?
Sounds good. Hey, congratulations again. You guys get all settled in. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much. Bye, Lance. Lance Lambert, but I'll stay on the line. Have fun.
Thanks, Todd. Lance, I'll follow up on the previous point. I just didn't want to leave it. Going back to the Republicans and Democrats and their landmark legislation that they're working on. It's funny because you mentioned them saying this was the only bipartisan issue they could agree on. I guess that puts legalization ahead of gun control, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, that's something that, there's not to say 50 shades of gray, but there is definitely different shades of gray when it comes to gun legalization. I mean, you have some Democrats that are pro-gun, but they're pro-regulation. Then you have some Republicans that feel similar. So they do cross over a bit, but there's so many different levels of interpretation of gun legalization and what levels it should be at, what the requirements, what the age requisites, to give an example of California, which we are a good example of kind of extreme democracy by way of the Democratic focus versus a Republican focus. Now you actually have to show ID to purchase ammunition. Now, that's something that definitely would not fly in some of the more red Republican states, say, in the Deep South. So you're right. There's very much a lot of debate there, whereas everyone's come around on the topic of cannabis. I think the motivation is a little different from either side of the aisle. I think that the Democrats see it, hey, this is truthfully a medical solution that should be recognized and studied accordingly. Whereas I believe more so on the Republican side, it's, hey, this is an opportunity financially for our city, for our county, for our state, no matter where or what that might be, for us to have a financial gain and to have a win at the end of the day. So the motivation might be a little different, but the fact that at least they agree that where we've been versus where we should be are two very different places.
Bilal Vakani in conversation with Boveda Inc.'s Lance Lambert. And Lance, we have a call. We were talking about the U.S. and our good friend John from Michigan called in. John, what do you want to ask Lance? And how am I doing?
Bilal, you're doing great. Lance, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you.
Bilal actually tried to get me to go see you when you were at Detroit CanCon, and I unfortunately couldn't do it, although I was just working down the street from where that was being held at.
Oh, wow.
I just wanted to kind of bring up I wanted to bring up something you were talking about as far as the states versus, the 5 provinces of Canada. I have a feeling what the states will do, and Bilal, with what they did with like highway money when the state wants, or when the federal government would like the states to do something. The last time I can remember something of this magnitude was they wanted all the states to raise the drinking age to 21. So the states, the federal government said, hey, we're going to withhold your highway money for roads and constructions if you don't raise the minimum age to 21. So if they actually come to an agreement at the federal level on marijuana, they will probably actually put some pressure on the states to come up with a uniform age and possibly uniform usage law.
Correct. Yeah, I definitely agree. And you're right. You're spot on. That's something that the feds have held over the states for some years. I know another good example besides the age limitation was speed limit. If you remember, and not to date ourselves, right, but there were certain states that wanted to go up from the regulated 55 miles per hour to, say, 65. And the first thing the feds did, to your point, was they pulled that card and said, well, you can up the speed limit, but we're not going to fund any additional increase of revenue to keep up your infrastructure. So you're right, how the feds kind of have those levers that they know how to pull in order to get things done. And I agree. I hope they do that. I hope they especially do that for making uniform rules and regulations around how cannabis is processed, around dosage, since we know that varies from state to state. And you're right, having a uniform age, which is something that even Canada did struggle a little bit with. Some places it's 19, other places a little less, a little over. So definitely is something that we need to keep in check.
Thank you once again. Go ahead. Sorry, John.
If I could, sorry, Bilal. I was just actually in a convenience store before I made this phone call, and for the first time I saw basically hemp-branded cigarettes with no nicotine and like a less than 0.3 THC content. And that's the first time I've ever seen it at a convenience store. I'm here in Michigan.
That is awesome to hear. I mean, that is very cool to hear in Michigan. So to give a little bit of background, so these are, to your point, they're hemp-based, which means that they have to have at least the less than 3% of THC. But to give you an idea of success, this is something that Switzerland launched as a program a few years back, and they've seen an 18% decrease in nicotine purchase and usage in the country since they started making hemp-based cigarettes available in both their grocery stores and in their quick-serve markets, if you will. So that is awesome to hear that Michigan's already moved forward with that, and definitely is a good alternative to the traditional, and the fact that it's all natural and doesn't have chemicals and fillers, right?
Correct. And actually, in comparison, like a pack of cigarettes here is between $6 and $8, and these were priced at $10 US. So.
Wow. Yeah, they're exempt from all those tobacco taxes, which, again, I understand. You know, they, especially here on the West Coast, inflated a lot of the tobacco tax in order to discourage the use of nicotine-based products. But, yeah, that's another great loophole for hemp, for certain.
So, awesome. Thank you for taking my call, sir. Yeah. And, Bilal, thanks for taking my call as always, and have a great show.
Thank you, John. Much appreciated.
Thanks so much, Sean. Yeah.
We'll keep it going, Lance, in the time we have left here. Florida's medical marijuana rules are unconstitutional, a court has said. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So the First District Court of Appeals struck down the laws that actually created a vertically integrated business model, as we call it, for distributing medical marijuana. So what that means is there are certain states that allow vertical integration. So that means that, let's just say that there's Bilal's Cannabis Company. Mm-hmm. You actually can produce, you can process, you can package, you can distribute, and you can retail sell that product. There's other states, I'll pick on Washington for a minute. Washington, it is illegal to be vertically integrated. So they kind of church and state it. So you have production on one side of the fence and you have retail on the other side. So they wanted to go with the vertical integration route in Florida. But, you know, it's been a headache in Florida since day one, even though 71% of Floridians voted to legalize medical marijuana back in 2016. There's been so much going on along the lines of legalities around what the actual amendment pertains to, and specifically Amendment 2 is what we're talking about. So they're saying that this is a disadvantage to other businesses, that it's unreasonable is what the court actually deemed as far as having someone that is competent in all levels of business when it comes from production all the way through to retail, which, I mean, I get and I agree, but these are things that should have been sorted out before legalization, not something that should have been done after the fact. And not to say everything's done perfect out of the gate. I mean, they modified the original laws in the state of Colorado 85 times within the first 12 months. So it is a work in progress, but these are some of the foundational components that really should have been sorted. And I'm disappointed in Florida. It's one of those states that it really takes politics to the extreme, and it's so politically driven that they can't get out of their own way. So it's really unfortunate, because there's a lot of people that do need medical cannabis in the state of Florida right now.
Lance, I want to get into two more things, but let's see if we can do it in about 2 minutes. I don't know if we can we make this an express round?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, perfect. So 6 months after legalization, high prices and supply issues are actually boosting the illicit pot market. There was one report to that extent. Are you getting a sense that's the case?
I am. That's another thing. It's a bit of an unfortunate scenario, and we always compare California to Canada, right? So legalization happened, but it wasn't perfect. And one thing that's been a bit of a challenge in Canada has been the actual fulfillment of demand. So specifically in Alberta is where this case or story came out of, where they're talking about supply is so hard to come by that a store was shutting its doors when it ran out of flour, because that was the highest demand product, of course. So it has been a challenge. It sounds like the demand is finally meeting supply or getting closer to that in this current state. But of course, people need to turn somewhere for their medicine or somewhere for their recreational product. So I think it's going to continue to be a challenge for the next several months to come.
Finally, Thailand's first batch of medical marijuana is ready to roll out. I didn't even know this was on the horizon. Lance, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that was some exciting news that occurred over the holidays last year. So that was the best thing that I got for Christmas, was hearing that Thailand announced a medical marijuana program last Christmas. And this is something that is quite a surprise to see them have it come into fruition so quickly. Now, they're only launching with about 15,000 doses of medical cannabis oil, but it is ready for distribution throughout the country by the end of the month. And this is just the first batch. They already have the second batch ready to go, according to their Minister of Public Health. So it sounds like they're moving in the right direction. Another one to keep an eye on as well is South Korea. So South Korea gave us great news on New Year's Eve of last year that they also were launching a medical program, albeit one that isn't going to have as much priority and emphasis as the Western medicine program. But still, one that's very exciting to hear come into fruition, because Asia is one market that we knew might be a little behind the times compared to Europe and North America.
We've just got to talk more in general, Lance. It's always enriching and terrific. Lance Lambert, Boveda Inc. Thank you again, Lance, and we'll get you on with Toddy next week.
Excellent. Sounds good. Doing a phenomenal job, Lyle. It's always good catching up, and we'll talk to you then.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Lance.
Thank you.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.